Hi.
Hi. Ah bon.
Quand c'est vert. Voilà. Non, voilà.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Good morning. Good morning, dear panelists. Good morning, dear audience. My name is Silja Fischer. I'm the Secretary General of the International Music Council, which is the world's largest network of organizations and institutions working in the field of music. And I have the pleasure of moderating this roundtable today, which is called Connecting Different Art Forms. Indeed, choral music lends itself to blur the boundaries, and I am being joined at this table by two experts in the field who will share their expertise and experience. Loïc Pierre from France, founder and director of the Microcosmos Chamber Ensemble. Welcome. Loïc will speak in French and kindly joined by Julien, who will give the English translation, and Tido Visser, managing director of the Netherlands, artistic director of the Netherlands Chamber Choir, which we all had the pleasure of listening and experiencing during the opening.
That's three of the members of the Netherlands Chamber Choir, and the others were the talents.
The talents, okay.
NKK Next, our talent program.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, we will talk about how choral music, how ensembles can actually interact with other art forms. And my first question to you is, for your two ensembles, what was your artistic choice? Into which direction did you choose to go connecting with other art forms? Loïc, maybe you can start.
Sorry, je dois parler français. C'est plus simple pour clarifier ma pensée.
Oh, okay. So, I'm very excited to be here, but that's me, not him. So he's going to speak in French.
Microcosmos existe depuis 33 ans.
Microcosmos exists. It has been a choir for 33 years now.
Et j'ai toujours associé depuis le début tous les arts de la scène.
And I've always associated all art forms related to everything that's related to the scenes.
Aussi le théâtre et le cinéma en premier lieu, parce que les grands maîtres qui m'ont nourri ne sont pas les compositeurs en premier, mais plutôt le cinéma américain ou toute l'avant-garde européenne en théâtre.
And it's always started with cinema and theater, because the first artists, the main artists who has inspired me are avant-garde.
Le théâtre d'avant-garde.
Yeah, avant-garde theater, and in cinema it's Americans, right? Ouais.
Absolutely. And, pour prendre un exemple sur les arts visuels, le cinéma a été ma première connexion avec le cœur dès qu'il est né, et on a mis en musique l'intégralité du film Metropolis.
As an example of visual arts, the first project was related to cinema, and in particular, the first project with Microcosmos was about putting into sound the whole movie of Metropolis.
Et après, j'ai continué cette recherche, là je parle juste du chapitre visuel, en passant commande à des artistes visuels, donc des vidéastes. Et en fait, la vidéo et le cinéma se sont entremêlés régulièrement dans mon travail.
So in terms of visual arts in this range, it's always been about asking particular filmmakers, for example, and directors to build and to create some films and some projects related to projects in Microcosmos.
Mais dans les commandes, je souhaitais toujours que les chanteurs soient impliqués. C'est-à-dire que parfois même, ils étaient dans le film, et même très souvent.
So whenever there was a project which was created for the choir, Loïc Pierre always asked and made sure that the singers were part of the movies in particular, were in the movie or were created in collaboration.
En fait, je travaille sur une impureté, voilà, j'aime bien ce mot impureté, la mixité des arts, une transversalité des arts. Donc, à un moment donné, par exemple, dans Hitchcock, j'ai fait un ciné-concert où il y avait 27 films d'Hitchcock. Les chanteurs étaient dans les films, et parfois, on pouvait ne pas les voir.
Loïc Pierre likes the notion of impurity. And in particular, a certain project included 27 movies of Hitchcock, and the singers were part of the project. Like it was mainly a part. It was surrounding the singers.
Et les compositeurs étaient associés.
And the composers were associated to this project too.
Donc voilà, ça c'est ma première, connexion et influence. Donc quand on va voir Microcosmos en concert, j'essaye, peut-être comme ce soir, qui est une fusion-confusion, je ne sais pas si tu pourras traduire ça, une fusion-confusion entre les genres. C'est-à-dire, à un moment donné, surtout qu'on ne sorte pas du concert en disant « j'ai entendu telle pièce », mais qu'on se souvienne d'un ensemble.
The main focus is through the different projects of Microcosmos to not question a certain piece that was sung or that was present during the concert, but to question the fusion and the confusion between different art forms through certain concerts. And there was a tiny spoiler for tonight, if you guys are joining us. In terms of mixing different forms, especially visual arts.
Thank you very much, Loïc, for this first introduction to your artistic concept for a holistic performance. I understand. I have a few questions which I will ask later, and we are all looking forward, of course, to tonight's concert, and we will tell you later what our impression then was. Tido, what motivated your artistic choice of connecting more than just of bringing to the public more than just a choral performance?
Well, let me first state that if you ask this question to a 20-year-old or 25-year-old, and I think there are some in the hall here, it's like asking why do birds fly. It's in a way biased or almost it's a question that sounds weird, maybe not to us, but it will sound weird to another generation in a way. So the world is changing, and what we are developing, for example, with our talent program is to ask, how do you see the future of a choral concert? You get answers that you cannot come up with as a 51-year-old. So I'm sitting here as an expert, and at the same time I'm not an expert at all, because new generations just think totally different and have a completely different view on and an original view on how you merge art forms. Well, the second thing is I consider the choir, and that's another old-fashioned phrase, but I still like it, so I'm going to use it. But I invented it myself. But it's the choir is the orchestra of the 21st century, and the orchestra being the classical body of the 18th, 19th, 20th century. Now, with the merging of art forms and this exploration of the merging of art forms, the choir is just an amazing tool, because we can move in space, we use text, which makes it a lot broader than only being able to play a symphonic poem. We can act, which means that we as a body, as a choir, we are open to different spaces, but also to use the space, the traditional spaces, in a new way. And that's, I mean, if you're an artistic leader of a choir and you are not doing that, it's like sitting in a haute cuisine restaurant and ordering a hamburger. It's just, you're not exploring what's there. So, yeah. So it seems evident.
It seems evident to you, Loïc. But in that case, what's the first consideration that someone who wants to explore these new areas, let's say, people of our generation, let's face it. For us, as you said, for us it's maybe not so obvious than for in a younger generation. So what are the first considerations that someone who wants to go out of the normal, let's say, what reflections which questions should you ask yourself?
Le problème du chant choral, enfin le problème de la musique classique, dans sa représentation, dans son concert, c'est qu'elle n'a pas évolué depuis 500 ans.
The problem with choir singing and in a broader sense classical music is that it hasn't evolved for the last 500 years.
Il y a toujours la frontalité. Vous avez toujours la scène et la salle. Vous avez toujours la lumière et l'obscurité.
You always have the artists on one side, the audience on the other, and then you have the light on the stage and nothing.
Vous avez toujours un émetteur, un récepteur. Et quand on regarde l'évolution de la danse, dès les années 70 et encore aujourd'hui, quand on regarde l'évolution du théâtre, et moi c'est la première influence, ou quand on voit l'évolution même du cinéma d'avant-garde, de Jean-Luc de Godard jusqu'à David Lynch et par autres, nous, artistic directors, on a un champ de possibilités avec l'art choral qui est immense, mais on n'a pas commencé le travail.
So whenever you see the evolution of theater, of dance, and of cinema, avant-garde cinema, David Lynch, you only can see that in choir singing, the possibilities that we have are so immense and that the work hasn't started yet.
Je ferai juste un petit résumé sur l'évolution de ces 15 dernières années.
And in particular, let's pinpoint the last 15 years and the evolutions that have occurred since then.
C'est quand le chœur a commencé à se préoccuper de la représentation, ça a été par la chorégraphie.
The changes that are happening, that are occurring, are on the side of choreography in particular.
Et donc de mettre le chœur en mouvement.
And it's when we are starting to work on creating movement and integrating movement in the performance of choir singing.
Donc à partir de là, le concert devenait un peu spectacle.
So that's when concerts become more of shows and more of
Et quand on regarde l'évolution, 15 dernières années, sur le chœur en mouvement, vous avez 85% de la production qui est liée à une chorégraphie sur scène.
So in these last 15 years, 85% of the work has been related to choreography of the choir singers.
Et Panda a fait ça formidablement.
Panda, Kisses.
Et vous avez ensuite 10% du chœur spatialisé, c'est-à-dire on franchit ce qu'on appelle au théâtre le quatrième mur.
So 10% is the spatialization of the choir, how much you're not still strictly related to the fourth wall, the distinction between the audience and the artist.
Ce qui demande au chanteur une autre incarnation, parce que là on est très proche du public, donc il y a une symbiose, il y a vraiment une empathie avec la salle et la scène est abandonnée.
Which asks for singers to be present in a different way related to the audience because the distance between artists and the audience is different.
Ensuite, il reste 5%. Il y a 4% selon moi, 4% où le chœur est en mouvement dans le public. Donc là, on frôle donc un travail sur la procession. Donc là, la relation est vraiment très proche avec le public, mais pas seulement par le chant.
So bear with me, we still have 5%. In these 5%, 4% of it is about movements within the audience. So not just crossing the wall, but also being in movement within the audience.
Et 1% qui est considéré, enfin selon moi encore, sur le théâtre choral.
And so the last percent is about choir, like choral theater and theater within choir.
Et là, donc ça demande, donc là on frôle, on flirte un peu avec le monde de l'opéra, un peu, en tout cas sur la présence du corps qui est sollicité mais en dehors de la chorégraphie, en dehors d'un mouvement, comment dire, collectif.
So the body presence in this particular 1% that stays, the theater within the choir, is the one which is closely related to opera.
Se pose quand même la question du chef.
And the big question within all that is, where is the conductor?
Et selon moi, si spectacle il doit y avoir, il faut faire disparaître le chef.
And so to Loïc Pierre, if there is a show, then the conductor has to disappear.
Les larmes de Saint-Pierre, Roland l'a su. Los Angeles Master Choral, Los Angeles, donc un des meilleurs chœurs. Peter Sellars, grand maître de la mise en scène, a mis en scène les chanteurs.
So Peter Sellers has worked on putting these choir singers on stage within. C'était quel théâtre?
C'était une tournée mondiale. Enfin,
Okay.
voilà. Et vous pouvez regarder ces images sur YouTube. Et ce qui est, selon moi, ce qui ne marche pas, c'est la présence du chef, parce qu'il y a un plateau qui est entièrement nu.
C'était quel chœur juste?
Los Angeles Master Choral.
So it's the Los Angeles Master Choral. Images, you can find images on the internet, and the problem for Loïc Pierre is the presence of the conductor.
So, tous les chanteurs avaient une gestuelle très travaillée, très expressive.
All the singers were extremely expressive within their body and their body movements.
Travaillée avec le maître Peter Sellars.
Were in collaboration with Peter.
Sauf que tous les chanteurs faisaient par chœur, et vous aviez un chef de chœur avec son pupitre, pas habillé comme les chanteurs.
So all of the singers were like doing their job and being present in a dramatic way, but you had the conductor who was wearing different clothes. You had the music stand.
Et on ne pouvait pas rentrer dans l'expressivité, on ne pouvait pas rentrer dans l'iconographie, on ne pouvait pas rentrer dans le tableau, parce qu'on devait passer par le prisme du cul du chef.
So you felt like you couldn't be included within this space and this artistic statement because you had the conductor's ass in front of you.
So, Peter Sellars, immense metteur en scène, mais je trouvais qu'ici, surtout que les chanteurs faisaient tout par cœur, et on avait un chef dont on n'avait pas besoin, à l'évidence.
The singers were singing by heart, so you couldn't help but wonder, did they need the conductor?
Non, ça c'était pour donner un exemple sur les bonnes idées, en tout cas sur l'évolution du panorama. J'ai pas parlé de la vidéo, du cinéma, etc., mais voilà.
So this gives an idea of one example of the evolution of choir singing recently, just to show, how many ideas can emerge, but how much the implementation of them is another question.
Thank you, Loïc. Indeed, the questions that I hear are: where should the conductor be? Should there be a conductor? One question. How to make disappear a conductor? Or how to make a conductor becoming a mediator, kind of a transparent person that is not creating this prism, this barrier between the choir and the audience. So how to reach this? Maybe, Tido, you can react to this. Another question for later is also how to. No, now I have missed the question. But Tido, what is your what are your reflections on this? How to make it? Should we make a conductor disappear, and how?
Well, if you're posing that question, you're talking about form, and if you start to try to solve the question through the content, you might get to different answers. In the sense that, of course, we are very familiar with this phenomenon and how to deal with that, with the kind of projects that we do. We did the Tears of St. Peter as well, with 7 singers in 7 glass tubes, and St. Peter as the holder of the key to the kingdom of heaven, as a dancer in between those tubes. And we had to solve that with the conductor being actually quite far in the back at the side of the hall and with two monitors. But then the singers had to deal with the fact that they had to sing in a tube, had to have in-ears to hear their colleagues, had to sing through a microphone and had to look at the monitors on the stage. So it was hyper complex to achieve the level of singing that you expect from the Netherlands Chamber Choir, which they succeeded, but that took a lot of rehearsal. But that's still sort of a solution. It's not a invention. When you go through the content, you might already get to different possibilities. One was that we had a project called Uncut, which was a recently world premiered a piece by a trans woman, autobiographical, very close to opera, where which I directed and where I wanted to zoom in on the phenomenon of anonymity, because her story, the story of Renske Vrolijk, the composer, was wanting to step out of anonymity, showing herself to the world and saying, "Listen, I'm a woman." At the same time, when having done that, she wanted to immediately step back into anonymity and say, "Listen, I want to live my life as a woman, as the woman I feel I am." So there was this constant play between anonymity and non-anonymity, and the piece consists of 30 scenes, and the first 16 scenes, you cannot see the face of the protagonist. It's constantly either singing with back to the audience or covered with hands by another person or all kinds of shit. But so the singer had to sing a lot with the back to the stage. They were wired, so the acoustic problem was solved, but I decided to create a comment on that anonymity, because the conductor was, if the stage is here, she was here, so she was like below. But I put monitors of the conductor, which normally are reversed so the audience cannot see them. I decided to reverse them towards the audience so that you could actually see what she was doing and see her expressions. And at the same time, you couldn't see her in real. So there you start to have a sort of an invention rather than a solution that is deriving from the content. Then one step further is a project which we are premiering in, God, if I'm still alive, 2025, which is very basically about a god who has lost control over the world and needs to find a way to let the world resonate again. And it's inspired on a 900-year-old drawing that was recently found, which is a form of a prayer wheel. And then we decided it would be very interesting to have a conductor, singing conductor, so then your choices are limited, but to have a singing conductor who sings the main part, but also conducts that choir, and who is actually having the role of that god having lost control. So it controls the choir, and at the same time it loses control over the world, and that starts to create friction. So then you turn it around, and you want to avoid that problem of form by finding solution, but really integrate it into your thinking already from the very first start. I know you do that, and but it's not always possible. Sometimes you have an idea and then you just have to grab back to those other solutions.
How do you prepare the ensemble for such an adventure, your singers?
Avec mon expérience, je parle plus de chœur, mais je parle de troupe.
With Loïc Pierre's experience, he doesn't use the word choir to designate Mikrokosmos. He thinks about a troupe. What is the word? Does anyone know the right word for it?
In Dutch, the translation would be mess.
Mess.
But that's not what it is. It's a band. It's a band.
La troupe théâtrale, non?
Troupe
Yeah,
théâtrale,
ouais.
ouais.
C'est une troupe
Collectif.
théâtrale.
Collectief.
Collectif. Ouais.
Yeah.
Donc, quand je passe les auditions, bien sûr, il faut qu'il y ait des jolies voix, mais il faut que derrière la voix, j'ai aussi un trésor qui puisse nourrir mon futur travail. C'est-à-dire, ma troupe, mon inspiration, c'est la troupe. Et en fonction de cette troupe, du potentiel de la troupe, je vais construire mon projet.
That's very flattering to me, what's happening right now. What Loïc Pierre is saying is that auditioning for Mikrokosmos isn't only about the voice, it's also about the treasures that one has within them, which will lead to this collaboration and will lead to creation of so many possibilities in the future for not the choir, but the mess.
Prenons cet exemple.
Let's talk about me.
Julien est rentré dans le chœur 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
2 years ago, durant la pandémie. Et j'ai bien vu que c'était un excellent baryton. Mais pas que je sentais derrière une curiosité, un côté polyglotte, etc. Mais il y a un comédien qui sommeille.
That's going to be fun. So yeah, when I got to audition 2 years ago through the pandemic, Loïc Pierre saw in me that someone wants to translate this, or that's very weird. Loïc Pierre saw the potential comedian that I could be, and how beautiful I was too, right? Or I'm inventing now.
Donc je ne prépare pas, c'est-à-dire en fait c'est à moi de sentir la pulsation hors champ de la troupe. Donc je veux une troupe qui soit plurielle.
So there's no preparation to this kind of processes. It's always about these people who are gonna be part of this experience and that are so diverse actually.
Aussi, quand durant la pandémie, j'ai créé un nouveau spectacle, Passion.
So Passion, which is translated to passion in English, is the new Mikrokosmos project, which has been created during the pandemic.
C'est le public qui monte sur scène, offrir son visage, donc ses expressions au public.
Within this particular show, the audience is part of the show. So the audience, exactly as we were saying that people within the choir were part of the whole project, people in the audience become, in this project in particular, become part of the show and get on stage.
Vous avez un écran vidéo derrière, géant, qui reprend le visage.
So the technical idea is that people from the audience are on stage and are filmed and projected directly on a big screen right behind them.
Donc c'est un travail de la vidéo en direct, mais parfois la vidéo devient cinéma. Peut-être le verrez-vous ce soir.
So there is, in this kind of projects, there is a lot of video and constraints which are related to direct projection of image, but at the same time it flirts with the concept of cinema actually, which you might maybe discover something about tonight.
Sauf que Julien est arrivé.
But I got here. That's me.
Et je me suis dit qu'il fallait que j'explore son terrain et que peut-être je doive réécrire une scène où je puisse bénéficier de son imaginaire.
So yeah. And then I got here, and Loïc Pierre he's working a lot in collaboration with us, and he gets inspired by us, and I inspired him to reconsider maybe a certain scene and this whole technical these technical instruments that we have.
Et dans mon travail de metteur en son, de metteur en scène, j'essaye de travailler sur une arche. Donc, il y a les pièces successives, mais ce qui m'intéresse, c'est ce qu'il y a entre les pièces. C'est-à-dire comment on passe d'une pièce à une autre.
So within his work, Loïc Pierre always works and focuses on these transitions and considers the whole project as an arch and not simply as a succession of different.
Puisque depuis 500 ans,
because the clap has always been part of the concept of a concert for the last 500 years.
Et quand j'ai vu Julien, quand je l'ai entendu, quand j'ai appris à le connaître,
When he met me, discovered how
je me suis
incredible I
dit
was.
que c'était pour un tableau la personne parfaite pour créer la transition et même créer une pirouette, un coup de théâtre.
He thought that I could be a transition in a certain point of the show and create this coup de théâtre or this interaction which was possible.
Parce que j'ai bien vu que c'était un showman de premier ordre.
And as I was a showman,
Et le spectacle, on croit que le spectacle est terminé parce qu'il y a le spectacle raconte aussi une vie dans le désordre, et donc il y a une vieille dame qui est assise sur une chaise et le chœur chante en coulisses.
and during the show you see the progression of one life, so you get at some point with someone from the audience who's an older woman, a grown woman,
Et il y a très très peu de lumière.
and you have not that much light.
Et à peine le dernier accord terminé, Julien, micro en main, déboule sur scène, s'assoit à côté de la vieille dame et fait une interview, comme si on était sur NBC.
And typically the transition really is abrupt, and I get on stage, and right after the last chord, I just interact directly with this person on stage.
Et je le laisse improviser. On s'est mis d'accord, voilà, en fonction des réponses avec la dame.
And I interview her, and I go through different questions and stuff, which aren't that written, which are improvised too. So we have this space within which I can do whatever I want.
Et j'ai encore travaillé le matériau Julien en le faisant apparaître à l'écran, en faisant apparaître son double. Tout d'un coup, son double, à l'écran, interrompt le discours de Julien et Julien dialogue avec Julien.
And the exploration of these individualities, so for example, my intervention, gets even deeper when we start using this technical tool of having the screen, and I appear like a double, like my image appears on stage, and we have an interaction directly. So it's always about taking what's there and diversifying it.
Donc en fait, je ne prépare pas, mais disons que je puise voilà, dans le potentiel de la troupe. Donc les chanteurs sont déjà habitués à cette transversalité.
So it's not about preparation. It's more about taking from these people who get in the choir and basing the work on the fact that everyone is very multidisciplinary.
Thank you very much. Tido, having listened to Loïc's experience and his way of not preparing but actually taking what is inside, the hidden treasures of the members of the ensemble or the troupe, how do you relate to what Loïc said?
Well, the role of singers is much more becoming a role of makers, creators, rather than only executors of the music that's written on paper. So we as the Netherlands Chamber Choir are developing projects where we more and more need to explore that side of the singers. That's actually phrased wrongly. It's to explore it with the singers. So it also requires a new view on ownership, on what is my relationship towards the choir. Am I stepping into a rehearsal space, having learned my part, and just coming to sing my notes, follow the beat of the conductor, follow the orders of the conductor? Or am I going to step in, be from a passive body, an active body, a participating body, not a denying body? And that's really something that we're trying to develop. The phenomenon of the denying body was actually described by I think the first dance dramaturg ever around, but she's Dutch and wonderful person, wonderful thinker, bright thinker, Peggy Olieslagers, lives in Utrecht. And she's talking about the denying body, but she's also talking about the question, what is it I want to be co-responsible for? And to ask that question to a body of singers who are, in our case, 10 years ago, used to just come into that space and just do their work as craftsmen, but not as participating bodies, that is a shock in first instance. It requires a complete turn of shift within your organization on all levels in order to get that done. And the funny thing is, I mean, a lot of us here probably have already mounted a little ensemble, a group, or whatever. And you always have that. For example, I started my own madrigal quintet, and we've recorded CDs with it. We've toured with the quintet, and we've given all kinds of performances. But as much as it was an initiative of the five of us, there's always one person ending up being the one being a little bit more responsible than the other and feeling a little bit more responsible than the other. So even in those small groups, you'll already have this balance, and how can you really make sure? And that's not always the mistake of the sheep who follow. That's sometimes also the mistake of the one who says, I'll arrange it, let me tell you how to do it. Then you end up like the Amadeus Quartet in 4 different airplanes going to the same venue. But you have to find a way to create an internal dialogue with each other to co-create and to ask yourself, okay, what is it I want to be co-responsible for?
I think it's a very interesting notion of this co-creation and the co-responsibility. It's not just the conductor who says, this is the way we do it, but you really expect from the singers a full participation in this co-creation process, which maybe not everybody is ready to buy into. So it's a process. I guess it's a long process, and it also relates, maybe now I'm going into another area, but it also relates to the training, the professional training of singers. How do you prepare? I mean, because training means preparation. How do you train the singers for this future of performances? That's another question. But let me turn to the audience. I'm sure you are burning with questions, and I would like to give you the possibility to ask questions to Loïc and to Tido.
Thank you very much for this very inspiring presentation or comments. There are 2 things that came up to my mind, and I would like to hear what you think about that. The first is about the role of the conductor. I mean, conductors, or the role of conductors was always in history depending on the availability of technology. I mean, in the Gregorian choir, so to say, with the dark, no one could afford anything like sheet music or these kind of things. It was a completely different role, like in the 19th century, where you had these lights, where you had availability of sheet music and a certain setting, so to say. And if I'm thinking that through, consequently, I would say, isn't it the fact that today a director is a completely outdated concept? Because, I mean, you might need him or her as a kind of rehearsal facilitator. But if you would make use, as you said as well, of the means of technology that are available, you could, with in-ear microphones and all these kind of things, you could have replace the function you need them for in a better way. So, and we are only talking about professional choirs. That's something, because there's a lot of amateur things going on. But I think just to say that, that's my first question. Isn't it an outdated concept, so to say, that we got rid of? And the second thing is that much of that what you've been talking about reminded me to rock shows. And I have to say, I was just very recently, I was in a Rolling Stones concert. It was the first time after 40 years that I've been in a rock concert, and I was extremely impressed by, on the one hand, of the high quality of sound and our technical means. You had everything what you were talking about, these screens. Musicians who were remote from each other, 100 meters. The one was running around there, and the other one there. And they were connected by technical means, by movable monitors, and all these kind of things. And I think they realized what we were talking about already. Why shouldn't we learn from rock shows?
So, we spoke about, thank you very much, Stefan, for the questions, for the reflections. It relates to what we said, blurring borders. Do we go into opera? Do we go into music theater? Do we go into a rock show production? What are your thoughts?
Je vais rebondir sur la préparation. Et dans Microcosmos, par exemple, depuis maintenant presque 10 ans, sur 4 services de répétition, il y en a un entier qui est consacré au corps.
So maybe just to go off about the preparation process, just to go through one last point about that. In a typical weekend of rehearsals with Microcosmos, we have like 4 services, and one of them is entirely focusing on the preparation of the body.
Et sous toutes ses formes, c'est-à-dire ça peut être, nous on l'appelle le corps poétique.
That's what we call the poetic body.
Et c'est un mot que j'ai emprunté à Jacques Lecoq, grand pédagogue, grand homme de théâtre.
It's a word that comes, a phrasing that comes from Jacques Lecoq, who's a great, il est français, non?
Oui.
He's a French theater man.
Et qui était le grand maître d'Ariane Mouchkine.
And he was the teacher of Ariane Mouchkine.
Et qui reste pour moi, en tout cas dans l'éloge de la troupe, aussi un modèle.
And he stays today as one of the models of Microcosmos.
Et justement parce que Ariane Mouchkine, par exemple, quand elle fait ses premières lectures, elle n'a pas dit « tu joueras Hamlet »,« tu joueras Iago ». Tout le monde passe par tous les rôles.
And Ariane Mouchkine's work, if you guys are not don't know it that much, it's really about letting everyone in the troupe, in the particular group work on different characters at the same time. So everyone's working on every single role.
Et donc aujourd'hui, Microcosmos est plus un laboratoire qu'un chœur.
So Microcosmos today is more of a laboratory than a choir.
Donc on essaye plein de choses, et ces corps poétiques permettent justement d'explorer, comment dire, le corps du chœur.
So we try a lot of things. It's a lot about exploration and trying to discover the possibilities of the body of the choir.
Et par exemple, je fais pas partie de cette génération qui travaille sur le corps chorégraphique.
Loïc Pierre isn't a part of this generation which works on the body as a choreographic body.
Mais justement sur un théâtre choral, en hommage aussi à Pina Bausch.
Rather, a choir theater, which is an homage to Pina Bausch too.
Et justement pour travailler sur un chemin qui ne soit pas narratif, mais plutôt travailler sur un imaginaire collectif, l'imaginaire du chœur, autant que celui du public.
And so this process doesn't focus on narrative work. It's more of thinking of exploring the imaginary power of the choir as well as the audience.
Aussi, pour résumer, c'est que dans le corps chorégraphique, il y a des choses formidables, évidemment, mais vous avez un seul point de vue, c'est-à-dire le chœur fait à peu près, ils font tous la même chose.
So to summarize this work, every single person in the choir technically does the same thing as the others.
Dans le théâtre choral que j'essaye de construire, chaque individualité a la possibilité de s'exprimer. Si vous êtes petit, si vous êtes grand, si vous êtes à l'aise ou si vous ne l'êtes pas, vous avez une place au-delà du chant pour avoir de la présence sur scène.
In this choir theater, every single person has the opportunity to be present on stage within embracing all their differences and being present in a certain way.
Ça veut dire que ça change le regard du public. Au cinéma, vous n'avez pas le choix. Au cinéma, quand on vous montre un gros plan, c'est un verre, tout le monde regarde le gros plan du verre.
So this expressivity that the choir has allows this experience to be different from cinema, for example, where if they show you a glass, you're looking at the glass and that's it.
Or, dans une salle de 600 places, il y a 600 points de vue.
Whereas when you are in a stage, for example, with 600 people in the audience, you have 600 possible points of view.
Et le spectateur est le metteur en scène.
And this is where the audience becomes the what's un metteur en scène?
Director.
The director.
Scenic director.
Yeah.
Et vous, dans le public, vous choisissez qui vous avez envie de regarder.
And the audience can have different points of views and can focus on different things.
Vous faites votre cadre.
You guys choose where to look at, and you guys create the screen and where you're looking at.
Et ça, c'est, en tout cas dans mon travail, j'essaye d'avoir un regard pluriel, c'est-à-dire que le public puisse construire sa propre dramaturgie.
And that's a big axis of work for Loïc Pierre, which is to allow the audience to work on their own dramaturgy.
Et le mot dramaturgie, et on n'a pas le temps d'en parler, mais le mot dramaturgie est très important parce que la dramaturgie dans le concert n'existe pas.
And the word of dramaturgy is very important because in a concert it doesn't exist.
La dramaturgie ne concerne que le théâtre et l'opéra.
Dramaturgy only focuses on theater
et le cinéma.
And cinema.
Mais le concert n'existe pas. Donc c'est
concerts,
peut-être à nous de trouver une certaine forme d'action, parce que c'est ça dont on parle, pour relier, connecter la scène et la salle, l'ombre et la lumière, mais aussi tous les paramètres, le costume, la différence de texte, voilà, pour créer une grande arche, ce à quoi je m'emploie depuis des années, sans trouver.
So maybe our work and what we're discussing here is the opportunity to use all the tools that we have, which are costume, lighting, and everything around like the show, the performance, so that the concept of dramaturgy finds its way within the concert or the performance. And that's a quest that Loïc has been on for a long time and still hasn't found an answer for.
There's actually, if I may connect to that, there's a I started seeing more and more dance performances. I started to realize that there is, first of all, ballet performances, modern dance performances are, the narrative is on a much more abstract level often. But I realized that there's very little knowledge within the dance world about the musical narrative. And so I discussed that with Nanine Linning, who is one of our principal choreographers in the Netherlands and working a lot in Germany. And she embraced that thought and said, well, maybe we can collaborate and I'm making a dance performance about a specific subject. And can you create a musical dramaturgy with that? And then you start to all of a sudden and that worked out very well. You start to see the dance narrative, but supported by that musical narrative, and it starts to mix, and they start to comment on each other. And so there's a world to win, even in this highly developed dance world, where we have to thank so much Pina Bausch, of course, who you mentioned. But there is, actually, what I want to do, I would like to make Pina Bausch come alive again and to make a project about how we greet each other after Corona. Because it's like, giving no box or shape or this or whatever, and then invite Pina Bausch, make her come alive again, and to do a choreography on that. Anyway, it would fit her perfectly. But there is this dialogue between art forms which can still be explored in that sense.
Talking about this dialogue, what would you say to someone who would be afraid that, say, the choir performance, the choral performance, is dominated by the other art form in the performance, that there's too much of something else, and that in the end the choir, I mean, as you say, it kind of disappears also. When you were talking about the was it the Passion Project, or like the choir disappears actually in the film scenery. So what would be your answer to those who are frileux, in French, who are a bit afraid of losing, because it's about losing, giving away, and maybe an identity or something? Tido, would you like to start, or Loïc? You don't see the problem?
I do know the comments. Let's put it that way. First of all, I think we have a story to tell on stage, and that's the way I see our role as an arts institution. So that already creates friction with the standard a cappella concert, which is what I've learned in over the course of the years in merging art forms, and at the same time giving respecting that remark is okay. How can you create a choral concert where never forget that you have to keep the choir central, and that you have to give the full music experience to keep it central. Sometimes you can. Sometimes we've created also projects where the other art forms were so overwhelming in respect to the choral, to the music, that there was a sense of insatisfaction, not only with the audience, but also with the singers. Like, we feel we're overwhelmed by this whole thing, and we have to dig our way through that whole wall of stuff that you've put in front of us, and then reach out to the audience. So I've learned to, from those mistakes, you cannot call it, but research, experiences, to think, okay, how can I keep that choir alive and in contact with the audience?
Thank you, Tido. Loïc, I think you are not afraid of.
No. Non, j'aime la corde raide. Je ne sais pas comment on peut dire il faut que je continue à chercher. Ça, c'est la base de mon travail.
It's always about a continuous process of looking for something.
Et des fois ça marche, et des fois ça marche pas.
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Mais pour la connexion avec les autres arts, il faut, c'est notre métier premier, défendre l'art choral a cappella. Il faut que, si on invite d'autres objets, d'autres influences, d'autres références, il faut que l'art choral en soit sublimé.
So the idea about mixing different art forms is for the the choral art to be
Pardon.
non.
Sublimé, c'est ça?
Ouais, mais...
transformé. Voilà. Et en tout cas, si...
It is to be elevated.
T'auras pas ton solo, ça. Mais si j'invite le cinéma, si j'invite la danse, si j'invite la vidéo expérimentale, c'est aussi pour que le public découvre l'œuvre différemment et pas par le prisme du geste du chef.
So when we add different art forms, when we invite cinema to the whole process, the idea is for the audience to discover the choral performance differently. So it is about elevating this choir performance in the center.
Mais je peux reconnaître que aujourd'hui, comme on est connecté 1000 fois par jour, si on invite encore une fois d'autres arts, ça peut diluer, la forme peut être floue.
But you have to admit that because we are in a world which is so connected, the introduction of other art forms might add a risk to the experience so that the choral performance is diluted in the middle of all that.
Et là, Peter Brook, qui vient de décéder, m'a appris ça, en tout cas dans ses livres, la scène nue, c'est-à-dire il faut enlever. Donc souvent, il y a trop de choses sur scène.
Peter Brook has introduced to Loïc Pierre through his books the concept of a naked scene, where it's always maybe about taking things off, leaving things aside and simplifying.
Donc, ne pas oublier qu'on est au service d'un compositeur, on est au service d'un texte, on est au service d'une langue. Voilà. Alors, comment ensuite les autres arts peuvent faire rentrer le public et faire travailler l'imaginaire du public. Donc, il faut que moi, c'est un de mes axes de travail, c'est-à-dire faire travailler le spectateur. Le spectateur ne doit pas être là.
So we never forget that the idea is to introduce the audience to a certain work, a certain composer, a certain language, a certain text, and that the idea behind all that is for the audience to be maybe provoked or challenged to discover and to be introduced within this whole process.
Il faut provoquer aussi le spectateur, enfin le spectateur du concert, parce qu'il me semble que le public de la danse, le public du théâtre a 1000 expériences. Moi, je suis très influencé par Castellucci, par exemple, qui va très très loin dans ses recherches. Mais nous, dans la relation avec le public du concert, on a encore beaucoup de choses à défaire pour trouver d'autres chemins.
So Castellucci's work, for example, in theater is extremely interesting because it challenges so much the audience, and Loïc Pierre feels that the same should happen within the choir arts.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Is there any last burning question from the audience? No. I think we all feel quite overwhelmed by what we have heard, and we have digged into a new world, if I may say so, a new world maybe for our generation, as you said in the beginning, maybe something that the younger generation is just, it's normal.
Well, let them speak. That's what I want to say. And I'm 51 now. I've had to wait way too long for an older generation to make way to have myself heard, and I don't want to be in the way of those younger generations. So the fact that I'm sitting here already makes me feel, in a way, uncomfortable because I want them to speak about the subject.
But nevertheless, if you were given carte blanche, what would you like to do? Loïc and Tido, as a wrap-up. What is the idea that you would really put into a place that you haven't been able to do yet?
I just would like to be in mankind a better being than it is, and create a if I, in my ideal world, I would create a performance where the fact that the lie in this world has become a style figure that we find a way through choral singing, which is the most vulnerable instrument we have. There's nothing in between me and you when I start to sing. Is that we find a way with the choir to find a new frequency where we can find truth.
Thank you. Loïc, you have the final word.
Là, je reprendrai encore une de mes références qui est Romeo Castellucci, qui parle que c'est fini ce quatrième mur, le mur qui sépare les artistes du public, ce mur qui sépare la scène de la salle, donc le chant choral le franchit de temps en temps pour spatialiser le cœur. Mais Castellucci parle du cinquième mur déjà, le mur de la psychanalyse, c'est-à-dire aller chercher au fond de votre mémoire, au fond d'un vécu que vous ignorez totalement, quelque chose que la musique tout d'un coup va révéler. Et donc c'est une question autant de répertoire que du voir. Parce que le problème du concert, c'est qu'on voit avant d'entendre. On voit le chef d'orchestre arriver, il ne sait pas comment c'est. Donc, il y a tout ce travail-là que j'aime. Et aussi... vas-y.
One last reference to Castellucci once again. So we have talked about the disappearance of the fourth wall. Castellucci talks about the fifth wall, which is the separation, the psychoanalytic separation between us and everything that's in the deepest parts of us, that music reveals and that music allows to open up. And so we're talking about music, composers, and pieces.
Le dernier mot, c'est peut-être aussi Paul Claudel, un French writer. Quand il a découvert le théâtre asiatique, il est revenu en Europe et la différence est sur le corps. Il disait, en Asie, quelqu'un arrive. En Europe, pour le théâtre, quelque chose va arriver.
Another reference to Paul Claudel, a French writer who has discovered the theater in different parts of Asia, and who, when he came back, made this distinction between arts in Asia and theater in Europe in particular, saying that in Asia and theater, someone gets here, someone happens in certain forms, and in Europe, something is going to happen.
Et donc mon rêve, pour terminer, c'est que surtout quand on sort des concerts Microcosmos, qu'on ne parle pas musique, mais qu'on parle d'un tout.
And so the ultimate dream would be for audiences coming to see Microcosmos to get out of the concert and not talk about music, but talk about what has happened.
Thank you very much for sharing your dreams. Thank you very much for sharing your insights into this really, really amazing world of connecting art forms, blurring borders, exploring, tout simplement. And thank you also for the transition for tonight's concert. We are very much looking forward to it. And we will come back to you and tell you whether we spoke music or whether we spoke performance afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for